Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video, and often I'm uploading videos talking about what I think about the current state of PvP in World of Warcraft and World of Warcraft in general, but what do you guys think about the current state of WoW PvP? I've got a Reddit post here that I was reviewing, giving some criticisms towards the current balancing for WoW PvP, and I wanted to look at it, see how accurate it likely is, and what could possibly be done about it moving forward to hopefully achieve a more ideal game state. And as always, if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. So do note this is pretty much exclusively around class balance tuning and not so much about anything else. Their first point here is enhancement shamans are absolutely busted and need like 2 rounds of nerfs to doom winds to be in line. Now this is something that I've been harping on as well for a couple of weeks now, months maybe, is that cooldown damage is too high. Damage outside of cooldowns is too low. That was my personal experience playing some 3 versus 3 last night as well. You just skyrocket your DPS to the moon, and then it just absolutely flatlines to nothing. And this is something that requires a lot of individual and specific tuning. For example, in the AWC and even on ladder, we saw Fire Mage previously just dominating with combustion and melting down their targets rapidly. They went in and they neutralized combustion and removed a lot of its burst damage, and now Fire Mage is basically not effective because they didn't compensate their damage outside of that enough. They give you like an 80% damage buff to Fireball, which ultimately, even if you're playing Frostfire Mage, from what I've seen, means that your Frost Fireball hits for like 20,000 damage, which doesn't nearly compensate you for how much of a loss you've met with your cooldown damage. And because other classes, like for example Enhanced Shaman, got buffs and their cooldown damage is now scaling out of control, Fire Mage is just dipping into irrelevancy, and other specs are just basically taking their position. So effectively the problem hasn't been solved, it's just been reskinned to a different specialization. And to me, the whole goal of this expansion was, you're not going to die in 1 second to the cooldown burst. We're going to spend more time between 0 and 100 building more intensity, which can happen with a large volume of specializations. However, there are still probably at least 10 specializations, Enhanced Shaman being one of them, where all of your damage is just in this little tiny living space that absolutely busts the wall down when it's up if the other team doesn't react to it appropriately. And then you're kind of just like wet noodle time in between. And I really want that gameplay to actually be achieved. It feels like it would be such a letdown for Midnight if they didn't keep balance tuning to try and get the game to that state, because it's so unfair to say, well, no, PvP is just dead and nobody cares about it. It's like, well, did you achieve your goals with this expansion, right? Before you say that, the goal was you're not going to die in 1 second. You're going to spend more time between 0 and 100, and cooldown damage would be less effective and damage outside would be more effective. That was the goal. That goal has not yet been hit for every single specialization. So we got to keep going before you just throw in the towel and say, well, I guess it's just done. It's like, well, it's not done. It's not, it's like half finishing your essay and then getting an F on it and being like, what? Like, I don't understand. Like, it's not fair to the game in reality. But let's move to the next one. I agree with this as well on Enhancement Shamans, bringing down Doom Winds, bringing down Ascendants, buffing their Lava Lash and their Storm Strike damage outside of it. This is something that I think would feel really good for the game and be a different way of playing the game that we haven't had. And I don't even know how many expansions it's just been press cooldown, one shot, and then wait. But I would really like it to be achieved. So Ret Paladins have the utility of 2 classes. They have the strongest passive slow in the game that persists on snare clears as long as the person is inside of the consecration. I do agree about the passive slow being one of the strongest ones on Blade of Justice, and it summons Consecrate, and then it is really strong snare. It's like one of those tar traps from a hunter, except they don't have to use it on global, and they can constantly put it under the target without really aiming. It does seem really powerful as far as slows are concerned, while also basically now being pseudo ranged since their rework. So this Consecrate snare removal and snare on the target was designed when Ret was limited more to melee range, and since the redesign of it becoming more ranged, these PvP talents likely need to adapt with what the baseline class design is doing as well to keep in tandem with it. I actually think the slow is probably, honestly, I think it might be the most egregious part of the kit for the spec, outside of the other utility benefits, because the other utility benefits can countered. But Ret Paladin, much like Enhanced with Shaman, is the same thing. It activates a Wake of Ashes, spinning hammers around, it 100 zeros you, and then it's back to just running around doing nothing. So it's another specialization also, which isn't mentioned on this post, that needs that individual tuning to get it to that point. Now, obviously, you can just leave the game as one-shots, but if you're a spec that doesn't one-shot, you're going to be worse than the other ones, and just leave the game as it has been since Shadowlands, basically, or even BFA to some extent. You can just leave it like that, and it is what it is, but it seems like such a letdown for what was set out as a goal for the expansion. Beast Mastery Hunters are more dumb than ever, now with insane kill pressure every 30 seconds. So, for example, BM Hunter feels like it has really high sustained damage, because Beast of Wrath basically has no cooldown, and it's the same thing with Ret Paladin. It's 30 seconds. Who knows? All these specs, they do an insane amount of damage in their cooldown, and their cooldown is like less than a minute. It's like, this is just like, makes no sense to me to some extent. But at the same time, it's actually got BM Hunter in the spot where you do good damage most of the time because you just have your cooldown up the entire game. So maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. Honestly, with BM Hunter, because it's so simple and so easy to accomplish, it's probably pretty dangerous to have it perform at such a high margin. And it's definitely scaling to the top. I can already see the BM Hunters in the comments down below going, "How dare you talk about our specialization?" I can already see it, but I do agree that BM Hunters are doing a lot of damage, although I probably would word it a little differently than this. Pres Evokers and whatever the F they are with the 24/7 uptime on nullifying, designed to handle classes with spammable CC, but the rest of us suffer for that and keep getting slept on. I do think there is some truth to this. This is to help you, block polymorph and cyclone from being spammed on you when you inevitably need to get close to the engagement. The talent was also designed with one charge of Verdant Embrace in mind, although maybe they did try and compensate, because the feedback before for Pres Evoker was you got to get too close and it's too dangerous and you get spam CC'd and you die. So by giving you this, it gives you more outplay. Now, it's a significant amount of outplay, right? And especially with how limited crowd controls are now, if you immune even one stun, even if it's accidentally, like, you're golden for such a long time, and their throughput is so good on top of that. So Preservation Evoker likely does need some type of nerf. I don't know if you go through for their throughput, or if you leave nullifying, or if you maybe lower the duration of it. I think the duration is probably on the longer side. I think it should be one of those things where you used it like a Shadow or Death, so you got to immune something for a second and then it's gone, as opposed to it kind of just sits up there for a while and then you do it a second time and it's up there again and you're just sitting there like, I waited for him to verdant, I've prepared for it, and now I want to crowd control, but you're just stuck sitting there waiting for it, and it just never goes away. But these are all definitely very similar issues to what I've been outlining so far as well. The sad state of Holy Paladins and Resto Shamans. Resto Shamans need Ascendance back at the very least. Resto Shaman, so this is the rabbit hole you're going to go down right now. Because they did correctly remove cooldowns on half the specs and lower their effectiveness, Resto Shaman being one of them, you feel weak now because the other half of the specs aren't done. So either you can rewind what you've done, which is, in my opinion, great work on something like Resto Shaman. You can just rewind it and give them all the cooldowns back, and they heal people back to full like it's nothing with cooldowns, and bam, we're just playing Dragonflight and Shadowlands again. Or you got to go in and finish the job on the rest of the specs that are one-shotting, or healers that lay on hands people with no CD. Like, you got to go in and finish it. It's not done. The work is not done. Resto Shaman is an example of that. So yeah, you could do this and go back, or you got to do something else. And then Holy Paladin, which is funny because Holy Paladin actually has some of the most powerful cooldowns in the game. You'd expect it to be pretty good, but its overall throughput has kind of been hit pretty hard. So eventually it's like one of those things where like cooldowns are good, but even your cooldowns, I don't know honestly what happened with Holy Paladins. You were like the best healer at the start of the expansion, and then throughput just fell out of the floor. It does feel like Resto Shaman's Holy Paladins need some type of buff, but at the same time, do they need a buff, or should they just nerf the cooldowns on a lot of these DPS, and then you just be like, oh wait, these healers are actually good, and they're well designed. Now this one, he's obviously been set off a little bit. F Frost Mages, F Stun Blinks, and F Team Invisibility every 20 seconds. Nerf it to the ground, and stop giving target drops to every class in the game. Facing hunters every single game and dealing with Feign is enough of a pain for the past year plus. Frost Mages, between 2 charges of Ice Barrier on a low cooldown, which is basically you activate it, you're guaranteed to not die unless you get unlucky and get purged on it. Alter Time, which again, if you don't get lucky, it gives you immune to death. Blinking out of stuns means you've got no win condition to die in stuns like pretty much every other class has. And then you can pre-invisibility on such a low cooldown, whether it's your ally to stop a crowd control or on yourself to stop a killing blow. So you just have these 4 cooldowns that are basically I can't die buttons, and then you get 2 ice blocks. So if these 4 somehow don't happen to work for you, which are all great in a burst meta, by the way, because if you're trying to stop damage in a 3-second window of time, all 4 of these are super effective at doing that, and an ice block completely blocks it as well, your major CD, and you have 2 of them, which is actually stronger than cold snap. So you've got this density of cooldowns that completely counters the way that the game is currently played at the moment, which is why it's just such a powerful specialization. That's why it's so good, right? Obviously, I think everybody was hoping that we're just going to delete the PvP talent that makes Mass Invis a lower cooldown. So it's like, yeah, you can use Mass Invis and get your healer to crowd control, but it's only every like 5 minutes. You know, it's like when Shadow Priest used to be able to mass dispel on, I think it was like next to no cooldown, and then they nerfed it to have a significant cooldown, so you can't just remove everything off your healer all the time. This is very similar effect for Frost Mages, but didn't really get touched, right? They seem to just be doing only number adjustments on certain abilities and certain cooldowns, and not really going in and removing anything that might be problematic at this current time. But that's the main reason Frost Mage is so dominant. Now, Shadow Priests are a joke. They are a punching bag with no way to avoid damage, while also being forced to waddle permaslowed towards enemy healers for 20 seconds without managing to get a fear. Seriously, return Psychic Horror to the spec or give it a mobility tool. Again, Shadow is another spec where they removed a lot of the utility, right? They pruned it down, and it doesn't have a one-shot. So this, to me, again, this spec was actually a success. The issue is they haven't finished the other specs. So you feel like you're just useless because there's other specs that can still play like a Shadowlands, and you can't play like a Shadowlands. You can't stun somebody, one-shot them, and instantly heal them back to life with Void Shift when they get one-shot by the Enhancement Shaman. So because those classes could still that and you can't, you just feel weak, and it feels like, give me back what I had, when in reality it's like you need to be taking away from the other things as well to get the game to that state. So like, I feel like there's a big decision that Blizzard needs to make. It's either you leave it like this, which is probably worse because half the specs will just quit the game because they're not viable because they can't one-shot, or you take the one-shots away and then see how the game plays out after that. At least it'll be different than the experience that we've gotten so far. So much like Resto Shaman, it's like, yeah, you could give the stun back. Yeah, you could give Void Shift back so they can counter the one-shots. You could do that, but that wasn't the goal of the expansion. So to me, it's just a case of the work's not done, man. Like, the work's got to get done. Here we've got half the caster specs in the game are straight up garbage in 3s, unless seasoned veterans are playing them, and even then, half of the caster specs. I agree with this on some of the caster specs, but I mean, obviously it's dominated by Windwalkers, Warriors, Enhancement Shamans, Ret Paladins. They're just able to one-shot people, right? And a lot of the casters can't. Like, Boomkins don't have a good one-shot. Ellie, if you're really lucky, maybe gets a good one-shot. Aflock, if you're bug abusing or whatever it's going on right now with Soul Swap, which is causing Unstable Affliction to hit incredibly hard, like, maybe. It could get some type of one-shot. Destro definitely doesn't one-shot. Demo doesn't one-shot. Are you noticing a trend here with the range DPS? Fire doesn't one-shot anymore. Arcane can sort of, but it's super clunky relative to the other guys that just press a button every 30 seconds that their next instant spell takes 50% of your health, right? It's just a completely different game for them. So they can, but it's not really the same. Frostmage can still sort of one-shot you with Ray of Frost, but the main reason it's good is because it has 10 immunities to all the other one-shots that the melee have, and it gets to snare them at the same time. So it's just the direct counter to all of these melee, and has the best tools to avoid being one-shot. So yeah, I would agree to some extent that most of the casters not going to be in as viable or as competitive a spot because of that. So privileged classes kept all their tools and gained more, while others got pruned to the ground. It's interesting that what is he calling a privileged class? Is he assuming a mage? Because mage got pruned a lot. Mage, leading into the expansion from the beta, because I've been playtesting this game for years throughout every state of it, was actually considered to be one of the worst casters. And then they went in and buffed it a lot. Now it's where it is, you know, with the double barriers and the altars and the low cooldown and everything. So, but I do agree that there seems to be a divide as far as design for specs, because some specs, I think they achieved the goal. They pruned some abilities, made the cooldowns less effective, but then other classes like Demonology at the start of the expansion, they gave them an extra interrupt, which they did take away ultimately later on, but they gave them extra crowd control. Howl of Terror is a lower cooldown. So it was weird. Like, are we lowering crowd control or are we raising it? Because half the specs you raised it, half the specs you lowered it. Are we taking cooldown damage away or not? Because half of them you did and half of them you didn't. So what's going on? What's the plan here? Because like I don't know what's going on, but we got to get on board as far as both sides of this, because it's leaving it in this middle ground is far worse than just give everybody back the one shots or take them all away. One way or the other, it's got to be done. So hopefully it will be. Season feels like it has more CC than ever with only 2 DRs being available. That's because they lowered the diminishing return timer. So it was like every 18 seconds you could be CC'd. Now it's every 16. with 2 DRs. And because certain specs benefit more from that, like Subtlety Rogue, you feel like you're going to be CC'd more against Subtlety Rogue. And depending on what class you are, you might even feel the same against like Polymorphs or Cyclones and Roots, because they're more available. So I actually don't know if the 16-second DR was a success or not, or if they should have left it at 18. I honestly don't. I feel like crowd control in PvP for World of Warcraft is one of those things where it's like, it's fundamental to the way that the game is played, but it's also super annoying. So how can you leave its impact with reducing its annoyance, right? And this is what they tried to do, which they have to experiment with things. And this did make sense at the beginning. Like, let's try the 2 diminishing returns, but we'll lower the timer so you can CC, get a full duration CC more often, but you can't chain it like over and over and over and see how that goes. I don't know if it's ultimately ended up working out well or not. I feel like I still get as annoyed as I was before it. So I don't know if that means it hasn't achieved what it has meant to achieve, basically. But it's an important concept to discuss. Devourer Demon Hunters feel like a gimmick, both for them and when playing against them. Though they are the pinnacle of one-shot. You build up this giant resource, Spirit Bomb, and chuck it and try and one-shot the guy. Which, again, I thought was not the components of the class design that we were trying to achieve in Midnight. I thought we were trying to make sustain damage better, spend less time, at 100 and 0, so you spend more time in the middle. But Devour Demon is a new specialization that's introduced that is just the pinnacle of one-shot you. And there's been a couple of patch attempts where they're like, yeah, we took some of the one-shot damage, we buffed the sustain, but then now it's just back. And same thing with Enhance. I think Enhance has been flip-flopped on and off from it. One-shots it doesn't, one-shots it doesn't, one-shots it doesn't. And I wonder if Fire Mage will be the same too, because now Fire Mage is basically non-viable. It was one-shotting, well now it doesn't. Are we going to make it one-shot again? Like, we got to nerf the modifiers like they did with Combustion, but then we got to buff more relevant spells than just Fireball for Fire to be relevant outside of its cooldowns. Or it's just, you're just going to keep ping-ponging. So I don't know if we're just going to keep ping-ponging or not. And then this final comment, they do have something positive to say, though. At least the healers are relatively enjoyable to play and shuffle, I guess. I don't know, going from the War Within Season 3 to this, it feels bad, man. I don't know where he's getting that point, because Marksmanship Hunters were absolutely cracking people in the War Within Season 3. I would not put War Within Season 3 as like a previous season for, the pinnacle of balance, especially in relations to one-shots. I would lean more into Dragonflight Season 1. Dragonflight Season 1 was probably my most recent all-time favorite season, especially for something like Enhancement Shaman. It just felt good all the time to play it. It was very nice. Very, very nice. And I do kind of miss that. And even with Balanced Druid, they did changes. They buffed Wrath and Starfire. Some of the cast abilities felt stronger. I don't know what happened. I don't know what's happened. If we've given up on trying to achieve that goal, or what's going on, or if they're working on the next patch and maybe this isn't a concern or what. I don't know what's happening. All I know is that there were specific goals that were set up for this expansion, which they achieved on half the specs, but now the other half are not. So it's like we're in this weird middle ground that needs to be settled. I'm very happy that they buffed MMR, because they also said as a goal was that Gladiator would be easier. And I think Gladiator should be more accessible. I think for a lot of people, it's just, I don't have the time. I never be able to get it. I give up, and they don't even bother, which is terrible. It's terrible. I don't care if it's a little less exclusive, so that people actually get to experience what it's like to get a team and play together and play in PvP, because it actually is good. It's actually fun. I'd rather them have an attainable goal that motivates them to go after, to have that experience, than have it just be this thing that only the best players get to hold over everybody else, basically, right? I think it's just, we've gone past the days of that being used as a tool like that. I don't think it's going to. So I'm glad they did buff the MMR. We'll see if it ends up being enough as far as making Gladiator easier or not. But obviously the class balance is a very important component to people's enjoyment of the seasons. And we didn't see any changes on Friday. So I don't know if that means they're just collecting data, because we do have a big patch with 12.0.7 that's coming up, and maybe they will address all of this. I'm certainly hoping so, and I'm certainly hoping that by making videos like this and you guys making posts like this and us bringing attention to it, to raise it as a serious concern, because I think PvP would likely have at least decent chance of succeeding, because under all of its current limitations, right, it's still here. I don't think any other game would be able to survive the types of limitations that WoW PvP has been put under, and the constraints that it's been put under, and the considerations that need to be made, right, when Mythic Plus is the priority and your class needs to AoE all the time, which obviously counteracted what PvP is usually designed around, and your classes need to do a lot of cooldown damage because people like grouping thousands of monsters together and blasting AoE, which is fine for that content. But we have PvP tuning knobs that can counteract what the needs are for Mythic Plus that would be not so great for PvP. So can we use them? Basically, is my point for this. But I just wanted to raise it a concern, open up the discussion. I do agree with a lot of this stuff. Obviously, when you're trying to relay feedback, I would say refrain from profanity. Lower the aggression a little bit. But it's at the same time, I think it's understandable to be upset, right? Like being upset. Just if you want your feedback to be acknowledged, though, it's usually a better route to be a little bit less aggressive. But other than that, thank you guys very much for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion, and I do hope that they will continue to hammer away at it, because I think it would be such a tragedy to not actually finish the job and get to the goals that were set out for midnight and beyond, right? So thank you guys very much, and I will see you in the next one.